New Hampshire has always been the place I have called home. For me, growing up here has been great, but I didn't know any better until I finally got some opportunity this year to actually travel to different parts of the country and kind of experience a different way of life. And of course, me being a real estate agent, I would love to sell you a house in New Hampshire if you actually end up moving up here. But if you've never actually been and it's on the list of where you might want to move, here are some things that you should know before making that big decision of things that you might hate when you get here. Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Shane Moynihan. I'm a real estate agent and investor based out of Keene, New Hampshire. And if you're looking to buy, sell, or invest around the area, feel free to hit me up. And if you want to follow my Instagram to stay up to date with my day-to-day stuff, that would be awesome. And during this video, if it adds any value, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps a lot more than any you can imagine. But with that being said, let's dive right into the things you might hate that I certainly hate about living in New Hampshire. So in my eyes, New Hampshire is great. And of course, there's a ton of pros on why you should move to New Hampshire. But here are some things that might deter you before you even get the chance to come out here because they're just kind of upfront and obvious. And the first one is going to be winter. We have rough winters. We're a northern state that experiences all 4 seasons, which is great, but also can stink on some aspects, and one of those is the winters. We have some heavy snowfalls, some icy conditions, bad driving weather. If you've never driven in the winter, it's a whole different experience because I know, like, I've watched videos where, like, in California, they freak out after a rainstorm. So this is way worse. Of course, you have an all-wheel drive car, snow tires, all that helps, makes it easier. But it's just something to be aware of. Like last year, there was a certain couple-day period, I think 2 or 3 day period, where it literally didn't get above negative 17 degrees. That's not including wind chill. That was just how cold it was. This was a very out of the ordinary situation, but I literally had to take my dog out for like a quick minute and a half walk so she could use the bathroom and come back in because anything else she was just going to freeze out there. And on Mount Washington, which is like the tallest peak in New Hampshire, they actually set a US record for the lowest temperature wind chill with negative 108 degrees, which is just absolutely absurd. Of course, winters and a bunch of snowfall could be a good thing if you're an avid skier, snowboarder, or if you just like partaking in winter activities like snowmobiling, ice skating, ice fishing, all that stuff. And one more thing before we move off of the weather type situations is with seasonality. Some months can be really bad with bugs and quite annoying, especially with mosquitoes and horseflies. Mosquitoes are kind of, it seems like most of the warmer months you get some, but a lot of it's more towards fall time. We're actually moving really right into the mosquito season, and horseflies are usually throughout the summer. They can be a pain in the butt and they hurt when they bite you, but they're a lot easier to hit because they're a little bit more slower. Next, this one's going to kind of incorporate a few different negative aspects and things I personally don't like about the state, but the state is just limited. And what I mean by limited is population-wise, the whole state only has about 1.3 million, almost 1.4 million people in it. It's very low population. With that being said, it affects other industries and other parts of living in New Hampshire. Like if you're someone that likes nightlife, New Hampshire doesn't really have any nightlife unless you're in one of the big 3 cities that might have a few clubs, or if you're in a college town where you're just going to be probably partying at a local bar with college kids. So it's definitely not good for that. You probably want to drive down to Boston for that, but then you're looking at an hour to 2.5 hour ride to get down there depending on your location in the state. Next is the food scene. This one I really hate because I like good food. And when I was out in Vegas over, when was that? Springtime, I think I was out there. Food was immaculate out there. There were so many different options. Every different street corner had different things. I was in love. It was very bad if I lived out there. Jesus, I'd probably be 300 pounds. But here, there's just not a bunch of diversity in different cultured foods because I think New Hampshire is 90% white. We don't have a ton of diversity, which really is a bummer in a lot of situations. And one of them, especially for me, is food. I really like different cultures and experience different types of food. So there are, of course, different areas. And with food trucks kind of being more becoming more and more accessible. It seems like there are some people that are starting more kind of culturally diverse food trucks, which is pretty cool. They're just unfortunately not really close to where I live in New Hampshire, so I'd have to drive for those. Then another one with the limited on population, just small state, is schools. Some of the schools around here, it's not that they suck, they just don't have the resources to be that good. Like in the small town I grew up in, the town had 1,700 people. My grade for like elementary school had 9 to 11 kids in it. So you knew every single student, that's for sure, but like there's just not a ton to do. Like even my high school, we didn't have a football team. We had no football team. One, because I don't think we would have had enough kids to form it, like actual interest in it. And two, we would not have had the budget to actually have a football program. So like things like that and like the after school programs and those things for where I was, just really non-existent. And again, it's not because it was a bad school. It's just they had such limited resources with being so small that they didn't really get to offer much. Now, of course, in a couple of the bigger cities around here, they do have better high schools and stuff. But I'm saying if you're stuck in one of the smaller towns, it could suck. Next thing I hate about New Hampshire is it just seems to be hard to make friends around here. And I've seen this kind of said online on other aspects too, and it's just a little weird. I never really noticed it until I traveled to other parts of the country and people seem more friendly. But it's not that New Hampshire is unfriendly or people are rude. It's more that they're just reserved. Like they just like their space and they like themselves. Like not themselves, I shouldn't say it like that, but they like just kind of, I don't know, sticking to their schedule. They're very reserved, I guess is the best way to put it, because like a lot of these places in New Hampshire are small towns. Like growing up, I knew so many people in the town of Lineborough I grew up with. But like I never actually knew them. I just knew of them. I knew what they did. I knew their occupation. I knew their family. I knew that stuff. I just never like knew them. But like if they saw me, I saw them, and one was like broken down on the side of the road, they'd be the first one to pull over and help. Just because we don't talk doesn't mean we're not going to help. So it's kind of like a weird thing. We're just like, I don't know, like I've never talked really with my neighbor, but like I know if I need something, they'll be there to help. It's just a weird little aspect like that. Like people just like sticking to their ways and not really socializing that much. It's kind of strange. And I think a lot of that has to do with the small town feel that they grew up in. The next we're going to touch base on is roads. And some of the roads around here just suck. And a lot of that has to do with winter time, because once the ground freezes, we get frost heaves, usually a split in the road that causes like a bump, and when you drive over it, it's going to like misalign your car and all that stuff. And then once springtime comes, the ground unfreezes, so then it usually sinks and turns into a pothole, and some of it just needs to be addressed a little bit quicker than it usually does. But because so many small towns around here, they don't really have the budget to go fix roads every year, so sometimes the roads get pretty bad before they actually get the attention they need. And the last thing I want to touch base on before wrapping up this video on the things I personally don't like about New Hampshire is sometimes, depending on where you are in the state, of course, travel time can just suck. It goes right along with the roads. Travel time can just suck. Where I used to live in that little small town of 1,700 people, to get to a Walmart was about 35 to 45 minutes for me. That was the closest Walmart they had. So like getting to the good stores, you usually have to drive. Yes, most of them have like some little convenience store or gas station, but you're probably paying way too much money for whatever you're buying there, because they have to upcharge you so much for it to actually make sense for them to hold the product. But that's a different story. So if you want to do like any good shopping, you have to drive to one of the big cities that have the actual shopping areas, which can kind of suck on some situations. Now that I'm over here in Keene, I have all the stores within minutes of me, which is super nice. But when I lived in a small town, I had to drive pretty far to get that, which it just is what it is, living in a rural area like New Hampshire. Again, I love New Hampshire, but it's rural, and some of that stuff hits on other things that make it not so good. So yeah, those are basically the things that I personally hate about New Hampshire. Let me know what you hate about New Hampshire if you're currently living here, or if you're moving here, what aspects do you like and want to move for, and what aspects do you have questions about, or you're like, ooh, I don't want to move because. So let me know again down below in the comments on those. These were my personal little beefs I have with New Hampshire. Again, a lot of them I'm probably missing because, like I said, I haven't traveled a ton because I still kind of have that small town headspace where like certain things are a little bit weird. So like there could be some big annoying things in New Hampshire that I just don't notice because I haven't lived anywhere else. I've traveled to other places, but I've always lived in New Hampshire. So this is just what I know. So I hope this added some value. I hope it opened your eyes to maybe some things that you didn't really know about New Hampshire, or like, ooh, that's a good point. Because again, New Hampshire is great. I love New Hampshire. It's awesome being in this small state where you get 4 seasons, you get the mountains, you get the coastline and the beaches, you get the lakes during the summer, you get the lakes during the winter to go ice fishing if you're into that. Me, I'm not really into anything during the winter, which is kind of weird. Growing up in New Hampshire, you think I would be, but I just don't really care for the cold all that much. Not meaning I won't go do it, but I don't know. Why go to the cold if you can just not go to the cold? So with that being said, I hope it added value, and I hope to catch you next week.